Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Bible Nerds. And I am with Tisha,
Hi.
Bene,
Hello.
and Mon.
Hello.
Welcome to our second episode, and would you believe? Leviticus. Such a strange book. And so sometimes, when we study about Leviticus, guys, I'm just wondering, did we really make a good decision here?
I hope so.
Because it is such a complicated book in the sense that it's filled with stuff that we cannot relate anymore because
Right.
it's ancient. But in one sense, that's what's fascinating about it.
True.
And I think the fact that it's weird that we're talking about this means that we should be talking about this more, because why is it weird? It's part of the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people don't really know about it. And I was sharing a while ago that my dad wasn't even familiar about this book. He
That's
was like,
right.
what are we going to talk about? Levituan? Levitine? What book is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that conversation I had with this woman who said, we're studying Leviticus? Really? Because she said that, it's like I'm watching a Bollywood movie without subtitles. That's what happens when I read Leviticus. It's like, what's this?
Yeah.
And so I was saying, but even if there are no subtitles, you see patterns.
Right.
Yeah, and she said, oh yeah, they dance everywhere. That's a pattern. And she said, yeah, so Leviticus has patterns. And in fact, the reason why we're doing this podcast is because we're going to provide the subtitles.
We're going to try at least.
Yeah. Try.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about atonement today.
Yeah. Kuyamon wrote this talk.
Yeah.
And maybe you can share with us just briefly, what is atonement?
Yeah. So atonement is a very interesting word. It's a theological word, right? It means that we use it for talking about the faith, and it's one of those few theological words that draws its origin from English.
Right.
So we have a lot of other words, like for example, discipleship. It has its origins. Most of our words that we use has its origins in like Greek, Hebrew,
Right.
Aramaic, Latin for us Catholics. And atonement, on the other hand, since it's from English, when we trace back where it comes from, you can see it in the word itself. It's atonement, at one meant, to make one, or to
Right.
make one again is another way of putting that. And so for today, we're going to talk about atonement, and we're going to talk about what that means to make one again,
Yeah.
to at one.
That's really cool, because I think maybe not for everybody, but for the few people who are listening to this and they're like really interested in theology and things like that.
Yeah.
When they think of atonement, they think of the question, why did Jesus have to die?
Yeah.
Right?
Which is asked. I've met students who ask that kind of question.
It's a very important question.
Yeah.
But does atonement really mean that?
That is at least a part of the bigger thing.
Right. It's a part of the
That
bigger
is
thing.
being told.
But like
it's
what
not
you're saying,
isolated.
you're saying is that atonement means at one.
Yeah. Yeah. And since we relate it with the death of Jesus, we see that there is something about Jesus' death
That brings about.
that at one meant.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a huge part of what we want to discuss today. Not just the death. The death is not the point.
The death is
Right.
not the point.
The death is what Jesus did, went through in order to...
Bring atonement.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to involve, it can involve death, but
And in many real situations, it does.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. But I think what we're going to find when we look through the scriptures today, that not every use case of atonement means death. And so maybe what we can do today is we look into the deeper or the more robust meaning of atonement.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we settled the by starting with the English word, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we can jump into the Hebrew. right?
Yeah.
The word that we translate to atonement,
That's right.
which is the word kippur, right?
Kippur.
So kippur literally means to cover, right? And the earliest example of the use of the word in the Bible is actually in Genesis 6, where Noah covers the ark. He kippurs the word is actually kafar, the root word.
Yeah.
Covers the ark with tar to make it waterproof.
Oh.
That's physical covering.
It's a
Right.
physical covering,
Okay.
right? And you might be confused. Why did the translators choose to
Right.
make this word
Atonement.
atonement? But we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Right. So in the talk, Dad, you gave two examples of
Yeah.
covering or
Yeah.
kippur.
Right. So the first one is it was used when you pay a debt. So which is logical because there is a lack.
Right.
And so you cover the lack by paying. You
Right.
pay that. There's a logic to it. The second use of the word kippur, that one is a little bit strange because it means you kippur, you purify something. Now, why?
With
And
alcohol?
how do you purify? Right. Today, in COVID times, we
Right.
use alcohol. But in their mindset, in their culture, they cover it with blood. And okay, that's icky.
Yeah.
That doesn't clean.
Imagine like in an alcohol spray bottle. It's like blood.
Oh my gosh. B plus. Oh my gosh. So yeah, go ahead.
So I think we'll have to zoom into that in a bit,
Yeah.
right? But the reason we'll put that on a pin for now. But
Yeah.
but it's the act of covering something with blood
Yeah.
to purify it.
Yes.
Right. So that's what the word kippur.
Yeah.
So in both cases, it refers to covering,
Yeah.
not necessarily death.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
It could mean
Yeah.
could mean death, but not in every use case.
Okay.
So I have here from Genesis 32, right? This is the second time the word kippur is mentioned in the Bible. And so this is the story of Jacob and Esau when Jacob was finally going to reunite with Esau, and he's terrified because
Right.
he's done a lot of bad things to Esau in the past. And so what he does is he sends an advance party to go before him and his family to bring gifts,
Yeah.
right? And so it says, and be sure to say, that these gifts, proyecto ni Mayor Jacob, the mayor who prints a tarp for that.
Got
Anyway,
it. Got it.
so your servant Jacob is coming behind us, right?
Uh-huh.
For he thought, I will kippur, I will cover him with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me.
There you go.
So Jacob's trying to cover for all the
Bad
horrible
stuff.
things that he's
Yes.
done to Esau in the past.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's very interesting because it's like a preparation thing so that they could then meet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, which is what Leviticus is about.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
preparation action.
Thank you for pointing that out.
They could come together like the brothers.
It's for them to draw near.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't actually create the reconciliation,
Yeah.
but it opens up a way, a clean space.
So that they could then encounter one another.
Oh.
I love it. I love where this conversation's going. What a great start to this
Absolutely.
morning.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
I just wanted to highlight that this is an example of atonement that doesn't involve death,
yeah.
Right.
right? Like Esau didn't say, "No, I will never forgive you unless you kill one of your children. You have
Yeah.
12 anyway, so give me one of them." And then, so no, and it's logical. We can forgive somebody who makes some sort of effort to show that they're really sorry for what they've
Yeah.
done.
Yep.
So this is an example of atonement where you see Jacob's repentance, right? And there's effort, there's initiation. He's giving these gifts, right?
Yep.
It doesn't involve death.
Yeah.
There are multiple examples of atonement in Leviticus itself that doesn't involve death,
Yes.
like the grain offering,
Really right.
right? Where you give the finest flour with some olive oil and some incense,
Right.
You offer it to the priests, right?
Yeah.
And you also have a different version of it where you bake it into a bread, and then a part of it is burned up and part of it is consumed by the priests also. So that's just one example, but there are more examples where you find these actions to cover over a failure, to cover over a mistake, a wrongdoing done to another person or a place, right? Because we'll find that in Leviticus, it seems that it's important to kippur, or to create atonement for places as well, right? And so yeah, it's I think what we're getting so far is that this is more complex, right, and more nuanced than simply the death of somebody in exchange for
Right.
So that's what you were mentioning at the start, that when we use the term atonement in the theological term, it tends to
be about that.
Of the exchange of one person's life for the sake of another person.
Yeah. And what's beautiful about that is that when we begin to appreciate better this view and understanding of atonement, and then we look at the cross, and then we look at what Jesus did, then it becomes even more rich. It becomes like we see the substance of it even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with the hyper focus on death is it paints this picture of God, of this God who who's mad. He requires the death
Of his own.
There's this New Testament scholar. His name is N.T. Wright.
Yeah.
And he articulates it really well. Diba? There's this famous verse in John, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And what he says is that that's what we say, but there are times when even though that first verse, that verse is what we say, how people come to understand it wrongly sometimes is that for God so hated the world that he killed his only son. But it doesn't work like that. That's not the gospel at all. Like God is not some power hungry master who's just looking for someone to blame or someone to get punished. That's not.
The other
really
thing that you
works.
mentioned while we were preparing for this conversation, you were talking about how some people would say that, well, you need the death because, God is merciful and he's also just.
Yeah.
Right? So you need the death of the blameless one. But you were saying that's not exactly just.
Yeah. And so the idea that's often contrasted is like God is merciful, so he wants to reconcile with us. He wants to bring us back, but he can't turn his back on sin. Like he can't just ignore sin, and so he has to deal with it somehow. And the solution that some people would say it is, he punishes someone else for your sin, something like
a
that.
blameless one,
someone who is innocent.
Yeah.
But if you look at that, in real world terms, like for example, if you have a judge, for example, and we're trying to sentence a serial killer, okay, and then the judge says, okay, here's the thing. We want you to be saved, serial killer. So what we're going to do is we're going to punish your brother instead. He's going to go to jail. And that doesn't sound that doesn't sound just at all.
Right.
It doesn't work out that way. And so
Because the brother had nothing to do with anything.
yeah, he's innocent. He doesn't deserve that punishment.
Yeah.
And it doesn't justify that the one who is guilty would then be set free. And so we need kumbaga, we need to refine the way that we look at these things.
We need to review this because we've created this wrong picture of God. And it's so pervasive. I mean, I have definitely thought of God in that way.
Yeah.
And we unknowingly preach about it in this way also. That God requires the propitiation of his son to forgive us, as if God could not forgive us without that.
Exactly. When sometimes preachers tend to say that there has to be a death for God to forgive.
Yeah.
And so Jesus had to die on the cross for him to forgive us.
Yes.
It was essential. If there was no crucifixion and death, then there would be no forgiveness. And I accepted that for many years until I realized, wait a minute. I don't think so. There's something wrong about that. So what we're saying now is this is amazing. This is amazing that there is this whole book called Leviticus where there are deaths There are sacrifices. There is the death of the animal. But what we're saying is it's there, but it's not essentially so, because there are many
Yes.
cases where there was no death. But
And even with the death of the animal sacrifices, the focus is not on the death of the animal,
Yes, it's
but it's on the life,
yes,
which we'll get to in a moment. But
go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
maybe you can.
No. Go ahead. Wonderful.
I was just thinking about what you were saying about how the innocent person, he doesn't really, I just had a eureka moment in the middle of this conversation.
Okay.
That throughout the Bible, there is a pattern, right?
Of a righteous one.
Of a righteous one
Yeah.
who intercedes
yeah.
for the sins of the
people.
guilty,
Yeah.
of the wicked people, right? So God doesn't necessarily demand the life in exchange for the
Yes.
that's the middle. That's the thing that
Yeah.
I think the biblical story is trying to portray.
That there is this blameless one.
There's a blameless one who offers his
who
life.
offers his life.
Yes. But God is not necessarily going to take the life of the blameless one
Yeah.
Right.
to cover over the
Yeah.
sins.
Yeah.
But God will listen to
Yes.
the intercession
Right.
of this blameless one.
Right.
And on behalf of his relationship,
Yes.
God's relationship with this righteous, blameless one,
Yeah.
God will forgive
Yeah.
the many.
So when Moses was interceding for the people of Israel,
Yep.
when they were because they worshiped this cow, golden cow, Moses said, "Hey, take me instead."
Right.
But Moses didn't die. What happened was God, but he still took the offering.
Yeah.
He
no,
still took the blameless one, Moses.
from the perspective of the guilty, you see Moses climbing up the mountain on their behalf
Yeah.
into the fire, right?
Yeah.
The Mount Sinai
Okay,
was set
that's
on
right.
fire,
Yeah.
right? And if the guilty person, like I can imagine, I'm like an Israelite
Yeah.
who worshipped the golden calf, and I'm thinking, man, if I was the one
Yeah.
who went up on that mountain,
I'd die.
I'm done for.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to enter,
Right.
and I wouldn't be able to be in the presence of such holiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But somebody like Moses, right, who did not do that, who actually the entire time he was in the presence of God, and he has a beautiful relationship and intimacy with God, that he has no fear of that he can come in open and fully surrendered in a way that somebody who's carrying that guilt cannot, right?
Beautiful.
And so, in a sense, Moses is still going on behalf
Yeah.
of the sinner,
Yes.
doing what the sinner could not do
Yeah.
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
But that act of the righteous one
Yeah.
is not simply okay. Kill me instead, so that the
Yeah.
other person can live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that the righteous person is going to go up to
Yeah.
God because
Yeah.
he's righteous. He can enter into. He can ascend the mountain, right? But what he's going to do there is he's going to intercede,
Yeah.
and God listens to the prayers of the righteous.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow.
That is, what we're doing here is because if you read theology, you study theology, there's all sorts of ways of interpreting the death of Jesus. You've got the ransom theory, you've got the penal substitution theory, and many other theories, a few of them more. And what we're doing is we're nuancing. We're not saying all that is not throw it away, but we're just nuancing.
Like if we look at the Bible and see how the Bible actually talks about
yes.
Yeah.
it's more nuanced.
Absolutely. So the focus is life, not death.
Yeah.
The focus is on the volunteering of your life to God, going up the mountain, intercession. Those are the focus. That's the focus of Jesus. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Go.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how the sacrifices mean life. Right? Maybe Tisha, you want to share about that because you've been working on the
Offerings.
yeah, what the offerings mean for Talk 3. So maybe you can share with us.
That's right. So when they do the offerings, which is where the animal dies, right? They actually don't focus on the death of the animal, because
Yeah.
actually what they're doing is that they're taking the blood of the animal, and for them, for the ancient Israelite, the blood means life.
The blood represent. I think Leviticus 17 verse 14 specifically mentions why, right? It just makes it plain and says, because the life of every creature is in its blood.
That's right.
You also find that in Genesis, right? When God tells Noah, don't eat dinuguan. Because go.
That's very intuitive also. Like if you were to look at life now, for example, if someone collapses, faints, passes out, what do we check first? First, we check for the breath. And then we check for the pulse.
Yeah.
So we check for air, and then we check for blood.
Yeah.
That's how we see if someone is alive.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so if the blood stops, if the blood
If there's no pulse, the
Yeah.
blood's not circulating, the person might be dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
so it's intuitive why that would mean.
Why blood
right.
is related to life. Yeah.
So they're collecting the life, right? That's why they kill the animal.
Yeah.
And so what do they do with it?
And then it depends.
Depends on the offering.
Yeah, it depends on the offering. What they do for one offering is they sprinkle it all over, and then it purifies.
Right.
It purifies the space, and sometimes they set it aside. Yeah. So basically, it's used to cover. It's used to
They cover.
cover and purify.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because blood for us, for example, is dirty. I mean, that's kind of
That's
like.
true.
But for them, it was clean.
Yeah.
It was clean, especially if it comes from an unblemished animal.
Yeah.
Which would be, we can interpret it. What's the meaning of an unblemished?
They use the same word, tamim, which when we use it for humans, we translate that as blameless
There
or
you
righteous.
go.
But
Wonderful.
in the context of an animal, it means that it's not blind.
Yes.
It's not maimed.
Legs
It's-
aren't broken.
The legs aren't broken.
That's right.
Doesn't have a disease.
So that's why the blood of an unblemished animal that has cleansing power,
Yeah.
and it covers.
It
So-
covers.
So what you mentioned it a while ago that the atonement of the animal, it prepares, it creates a clean space.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
because something that I think that is difficult for us to understand in modern context is that in their view, you would have to create atonement not just between people, right, but also for a place, right, for a place that has become defiled, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The concept of sin for the Israelites was something that did not just affect you
That's
personally,
right.
but it in fact affects the people around them, the community,
And affects the tabernacle
and the
itself.
environment, the tabernacle itself.
Yeah.
So if the Israelite community, which is in a covenant with God, in a relationship with God, they're supposed to represent God and be His people. If they commit sin, right, a moral failure, if they don't live up to loving their neighbor and loving God as they should, what actually happens is that they believe that the tabernacle gets dirty. It
And
gets
what happens
corrupted
if that happens?
by the sin.
Yes.
And so that's bad. That's a no-no.
Yeah, because if God's dwelling place gets defiled, then that means God can't dwell in there.
Yes.
And that's what's going to happen. He's going to abandon his dwelling place.
Yes, exactly. And so they have to prepare the I guess this is like of maybe a crude analogy is being a host in like having some guests over in your house, and you want to make sure that it's not messy and it's not dirty, right? Imagine if your guests stayed over in your house and then you just decided, okay, well, they're already here. Make yourself feel at home, but I'm not going to clean anything. So that's not part of the agreement. You're going to.
Yeah. I think the difference is that for modern people, sin is a very private thing.
Yeah.
You know, I did something wrong, and
Right.
but for the ancient Hebrews, no, sin is pollution,
Yeah.
and so it pollutes.
Yes.
And I think there's really look at it, it's common sense.
Yeah.
That when you do something wrong, it affects your relationships.
It's hard to trust somebody
Yeah.
who's committed a wrong against you.
Yeah.
You have to do something about it.
And it affects the family, it affects the home life.
That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
imagine a man who commits adultery, the husband who commits adultery. It doesn't affect only him, it affects his wife, it affects the children.
Yeah. That's
right.
It affects nephews and nieces and uncles and aunts and
Yeah.
the neighbors, because and that's what happens to
And they believe that it affects the tabernacle. And they have to create atonement
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
they have to purify.
There should be a regular way to clean it
That's
out.
right.
Because people are broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And so they use blood.
Mm-hmm.
They use blood. But I mean, I was just thinking about this the other day because I went to confession and I was thinking about how in the world does me just saying my sins to another person forgive me?
Mm-hmm.
Like what? There's nothing really that happens. Like I'm just saying it. It's just my words coming out, but
Right.
somehow it does.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know it seems like a stretch, but just try to put yourself in the shoes of the ancient Israelite. For them, this was a visceral symbol, right? It was a tangible ritual that they could
Yeah.
see and experience that they believed was creating a clean space, right? A clean space
Beautiful.
for them
Right.
to recommit themselves and re-enter into the relationship with God.
That's right.
So when you say sacrifice, the idea for me, if I'm thinking of let's get that example of a confession. When you go to a priest, there is a sacrifice, and it is the sacrifice of pride. That okay, I can't handle this. God, I need you, and I can't handle this. I need the community, and the priest
Yes.
represents that community. A lot of humility,
Yes.
which I think, and for those of you who are joining us at the feast, and we do encourage everyone who is not yet attending, try it out because we're covering Leviticus at the feast right now. And so in the feast, we were sharing that yes, there is a sacrifice, atonement. There has to be a sacrifice if you want atonement, if you want reconciliation, atonement. And yeah, right now at this moment, just come before God and sacrifice your pride, where you think you don't need God, you think you can define good and bad, apart from Him. No, come before the Lord. Do the very opposite, and sacrifice
Right.
your pride.
Right. I think sacrifice, like animal sacrifice,
Yeah,
in Leviticus,
yeah,
the having to give up the life of your investment, right? Because you
Oh, yeah.
have to bring an animal that you raised. I mean, later on, you can actually purchase a lamb, which costs money, and
Yeah.
that's from your own hard work
That's
as well. But you're bringing something and you're giving it up to the Lord. It doesn't make sense. It's the opposite of what your intuition is telling you. Because your intuition is saying, I need this to feed my family. And I need this to, if for example, livestock, they can raise more, they can sell it. They live off these animals, right? But they're going against their definition of good,
Right.
right? And they trust in God's compassion, His
Beautiful.
forgiveness, and His ability to provide for them.
beautiful. I don't know if we mentioned this, and we could mention this in the next episode, but I think it would be good to mention also here as well. We can repeat it there. It's that you were saying, Benny, that the word sacrifice only appears once in the 7 chapters
Yeah.
where 5 sacrifices were being explained
Yeah.
in the book of Leviticus. That's what we're going to cover next episode. We'll go to each of those 5
Yeah.
Levitical sacrifices. But I think it'll be good to mention because we were saying focus on life, not death, and all of
Yes.
that. So I think one of the reasons why we realize that is because in Leviticus, the 7 chapters on sacrifices, only once did the word sacrifice appear.
Yeah. It's they sparingly use the word sava, which is the
Yeah.
Hebrew word for sacrifice, and they use the word korban instead,
And which means
Korban.
which means drawing near.
drawing near. That's the focus.
God calls them to, when you korban, when you draw near, bring a korban, a drawing near thing,
Yeah.
Whoa.
something that will allow you, prepare you to
Yeah.
draw
Yeah.
near before God.
So 5 sacrifices were called 5 offerings,
yeah.
which is 5 draw near things.
Wow.
Love it.
Yeah. So
That's the emphasis.
maybe we've talked about a lot of things, and let's kind of zoom out and
Yeah.
go big picture. Right?
Okay.
So we're trying to talk about atonement and what it means, and it's about the life, right?
Yes.
Why does the blood have the power to cover over
Right.
the failure and the sin? These failure and sin is a symbol of death in the community, right? Why does blood have the power to cover over it? Well, it was because the Israelites believed that life was more powerful than death, right? And that all these things, these sacrifices, I know they're strange, they're weird, but all of these things represented how God was allowing this constant renewal and recreation of the Israelite community to be the kind of people that can dwell with God, that to be in this relationship where there would be second chances, to be in this relationship where God would provide a way so that even if they mess up, right? And because they have a lot to learn in this wilderness journey, moving to the promised land, right? God wants to create a way for them to be able to remain close to Him.
Yeah.
And that's, I believe that's the message of Leviticus. It's what we've been telling the feasters, right? That this strange book is actually just really trying to get to one thing, that God desires closeness.
That's right.
If we compare that from earlier at the very beginning of this podcast, where we were talking about how people have this image of God that is demanding the death of a person or a creature, and that He wouldn't let go or forgive if there was no one-to-one exchange. When you read Leviticus, you see that it's actually not the case. That God provides multiple points and multiple points of reconciliation and atonement that covers for every kind of situation in everyday life, so that the community of the Israelites could live with God.
Yeah.
It's about the life with God.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so with that big picture in mind, it kind of shows us that it doesn't then mean that death has no place in this story.
No.
Or that death has no place in this at-one-ment. I mean, even if we look at, for example, our relationships, when someone was wronged and we need to reconcile, there cannot be reconciliation without repentance. Something has to
Right.
die within you, or something has to give,
That's
right? And it is with that lens then that we could take a look at the death of Jesus on the cross, right? Not as something that God demands, or not
Right.
as something that not as something na kumbaga, if this doesn't happen then you won't be forgiven.
Yeah.
No, but it kind of sets the stage also for us, and this is why the cross in the same manner is also very central to our faith. And when we're looking at the cross, it's always connected. The three things, right? It's the incarnation, the cross, and the resurrection.
Yeah.
These are all interconnected.
Beautiful.
I guess part of what we're encouraging here is that when we reflect and take a look at Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, let's also view it with the resurrection in mind.
That's right.
Love it.
Yeah, that's the picture.
The new life that comes after.
The new life that comes after, the reconciliation, the
Yes.
at-one-ment that happens after we give up our limited and frail and fractured version of life. It's replaced with God's full and complete and beautiful version of life, right? Which is life with God,
Yeah.
right?
Love it.
That's
Love it.
what John 17 says, right? Eternal life is knowing the Father and the Son,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? That's what life is about. And Leviticus is creating a way for that for the ancient Israelites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that sums everything
Wow.
everything together.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so there, we covered our second episode on Leviticus, on atonement. Next episode, we're going to work on the 5 sacrifices.
We'll go and experience it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Whoa.
Well.
We'll try to talk about what exactly happened, so that you're not clueless anymore to what's going on with all the blood. So hopefully, to all our vegan friends, hope you won't feel so squeamish, but try to appreciate
Right.
what's actually happening, and how this is allowing the Israelites to go back into the garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we invite you to, tell people about this podcast if they want to know more about the Lord, about the Bible, about, how to live your life. And, I think there are people who want to believe, but they want to believe sensibly. They want to make sense out of things.
Yeah.
That there's so many questions.
Yeah.
And so this is a podcast for people who are curious, for people who are asking questions.
Yeah.
And I think it's, just tell people about it. And then also, we do want you to sign up to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll know when the next episode is coming. You'll be notified. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, see you.
See you guys.
See you.
God bless you. See you in our next episode.